Serafina Thorne threw my baby stroller through the wrought iron gates of the estate, right into the pouring rain. My husband stood next to her under the stone portico of the entrance, telling me I was an embarrassment to his family. I pulled our 3-month-old son tight against my chest, stared at the mud splattered across the overturned stroller, and took a single photograph before walking away. Sterling thought my silence meant I had finally broken. He should have been smarter. By midnight, the Greenwich, Connecticut mansion, where he had installed his mistress, would no longer belong to him. Serafina hadn't thrown the stroller by accident. She had placed both her perfectly manicured hands on the handlebar, smiled at me through the forged iron bars, and shoved it with such force that it tipped over before striking the wet asphalt of the driveway, one wheel spinning uselessly in the downpour. The light gray cashmere blanket I had carefully tucked into the basket tumbled out and landed squarely in a puddle. For 1 second, I stopped breathing. My son, Ronan, shifted against my shoulder. His cheek was warm with sleep. His tiny fist pressed against my collarbone. He trusted me because he was still too young to know that adults could be cruel simply for the fun of it. The rain battered the Harrington estate in sheets, turning the granite steps slick and silver. Behind those gates stood the house Sterling had promised would be ours after Ronan was born. The nursery I had painted myself was on the 2nd floor. My hospital bag was still sitting in the closet. My nursing chair faced the garden, and yet, standing at the gate laughing, was my husband's mistress. "Maybe now she'll understand," Serafina said. "This isn't a shelter for abandoned wives." I looked right through her, locking eyes with Sterling. He stood under the overhang in a dark overcoat, one hand casually in his pocket, dry and untouched by the storm. His mother, Vivian Harrington, stood behind him holding a glass of white wine, watching the scene as if observing a neighbor's poorly trained dog. "Sterling," I said. My voice came out calm. Too calm. He let out a heavy sigh, as if I had merely inconvenienced him. "Alara, you shouldn't have come here looking like this." "Looking like what? Overly emotional? Causing drama with a baby in the rain?" I stared at him. "This is our home." Serafina laughed again. "You mean his home?" It was in that exact moment that I understood. I didn't suspect. I wasn't frightened, I understood. Sterling hadn't just cheated. He had seamlessly integrated Serafina into the life I had been exiled from. Earlier that day, I had gone to my postpartum checkup. Ronan had been fussy, so I drove straight from the doctor's office to the estate because his favorite pacifier was still in the nursery. I had texted Sterling twice. He never answered. When the security guard at the gatehouse opened the side pedestrian gate, Serafina had walked out wearing my cream cashmere robe. My robe. She smelled like my shampoo. At first, I thought my mind was playing a cruel trick. Sleep deprivation can do that. 3 months of sleepless nights, stitches, milk stains, quiet crying, and Sterling's growing detachment had made the world blurry. Then Serafina had leaned over to peer into Ronan's stroller. "What a plain baby," she had said. "Takes after you, I suppose." I told her to step away from my child. She declared I was trespassing on private property. Then, she shoved the stroller into the rain. Now, Sterling was slowly walking down the driveway, but not toward me. He walked to Serafina, placing his hand on the small of her back. "Ilara," he said. "You need to apologize." The words hit me colder than the rain. "For what?" "For making a scene at my family's house?" Behind him, Vivian gave a barely perceptible, approving nod. I hoisted Ronan higher. My son was still half asleep, his eyelashes fluttering. A raindrop slid from my hair onto his blanket, and I turned to shield him with my body. "She threw our son's stroller into the rain," I said. A muscle feathered in Sterling's jaw. "It's just a stroller. You can buy another one." "It's Ronan's stroller." I looked at the man I had married 5 years ago. Sterling Harrington had held my hand on the steps of Manhattan City Hall and promised we would build a life free from his mother's archaic rules. He used to say he loved me because I didn't care about the Harrington name. He said my strength made him proud. After Ronan was born, that pride curdled into irritation. He hated the crying, hated the bottles on the granite counters, hated that my body didn't instantly snap back to its pre-pregnancy shape. He hated when I asked where he had been when he came home reeking of someone else's perfume. And now, in front of his mistress, he hated that I was still standing on my own 2 feet. Serafina crossed her arms. "Sterling, make her leave." "Make her leave." The gate guard, Callum, stood near the security booth, his eyes glued to the pavement. He had worked for the Harringtons for 12 years. He had opened these gates for me on my wedding day. He had helped carry flowers into the house. He had seen me bring Ronan home from the hospital. He didn't say a word. No one did. So I spoke. "Callum," I said, never taking my eyes off Sterling. "Please ensure the security footage from these gates is preserved." Serafina's smile vanished. Sterling narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say?" I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My fingers were wet but perfectly steady. I took one photo of the stroller lying in the puddle, one photo of Serafina in my robe, and one photo of Sterling standing beside her. Then I opened my voice memo app and held the phone down by my side. "Sterling," I said clearly, "you just watched Serafina throw Ronan's stroller into the rain." He took a step closer. "Put the phone away. Answer me. This is exactly what I mean. You always escalate things." "No," I said. "I document them." Vivienne's face turned to stone. "Don't you dare threaten this family." "I'm not threatening anyone." Serafina pointed toward the street. "Then leave." I looked at Sterling one last time. "You are asking your wife and your infant son to walk away from this house in a storm?" His lips twitched for a fraction of a second. I saw hesitation, not remorse, but calculation. Then he said, "I am asking you to stop embarrassing me." It was his choice. Not Serafina's, not Vivienne's, his own. I carefully bent down, supporting Ronan securely with one arm, and retrieved the soaked cashmere blanket from the puddle. I didn't pick up the stroller. I left it exactly where she had thrown it. There are moments in a woman's life when a broken heart becomes strangely quiet. Not peaceful, not painless, but quiet. As if something inside has simply stopped begging. I turned and walked toward my SUV. Sterling shouted after me, "Alara!" I didn't look back. "You're not taking my son anywhere." That made me stop. Slowly, I looked over my shoulder. The rain was streaming down my face, but my voice was crystal clear. Ronan is not an object you only remember when another woman disrespects him. My husband's face darkened. Serafina slipped her arm through his. "Let her go. She'll come crawling back by morning." I smiled then. It was a faint, exhausted, almost sorrowful smile. "No," I said. "I won't." I strapped Ronan into his car seat. My hands moved with the automatic precision of motherhood. Click, tighten, check the straps, tuck the dry blanket over his legs. One last kiss on his forehead. Only when I was in the driver's seat, with the doors locked and the engine running, did I allow myself to take a breath. My phone buzzed before I shifted into drive. "Sterling." I declined the call. A second later, a text came through. "Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." I stared through the windshield at the estate gates. For 3 years, I had tried to keep this marriage from getting ugly. I had ignored the late nights, smoothed over the insults, paid the bills. Sterling conveniently forgot about, transferred money when Vivienne said the family accounts were experiencing temporary liquidity issues, signed off on renovations because Sterling said it was good for the property's equity, and hosted galas while bleeding through postpartum pads because appearances mattered. I had mistaken endurance for love. All of that ended at those gates. I opened my contacts and scrolled to a number I hadn't called in almost a year. Dad. My thumb hovered over the screen. Thaddeus Vance had warned me about the Harringtons. He had called Sterling charming, polished, and entirely hollow. I had called my father a tyrant. We had said things to each other that couldn't be unsaid. Since the wedding, we had only communicated on holidays and through my younger brother. But when he answered, his voice shifted the exact second he heard me. "Alara." I looked at Ronan in the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide and dark, staring back at me. "Dad," I said, "I need a lawyer." No hesitation. "Are you hurt?" "No. The baby is cold, but safe." A pause. "What happened?" I looked at the estate one last time. Serafina had gone inside. Sterling was still standing under the portico, phone in hand. Furious that I wasn't replying, Sterling chose another woman at the gates of his house, I said. She threw Ronan's stroller into the rain. My father's silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then he asked, "Where are you?" I gave him the address of an upscale Midtown Manhattan hotel. "I'm sending a car and Rosalind Mercer," he said. "Do not go back to that house. Do not speak to your husband without counsel. Do not delete anything." "I won't." Alara. Yes? His voice grew colder than I had ever heard it. That Greenwich estate is heavily leveraged through Harrington Holdings, isn't it? I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I think so. Sterling mentioned a bridge loan last spring. Then drive to the hotel, he said. By midnight, that house will no longer be theirs. The hotel room smelled of expensive lemon cleaner and old carpet. It wasn't where I had pictured spending the night with my 3-month-old son. There was no crib, no rocking chair, no neatly folded muslin swaddles and a dresser. Just a king-sized bed, a narrow desk, and a view of traffic lights bleeding red and green against the wet glass. But the door locked. No one could order me to leave. No one could dress their mistress in my robe and call me hysterical. I laid Ronan in the center of the bed on a clean towel and changed him out of his damp onesie. His skin was warm, no fever. He made a soft, indignant noise as I toweled the rainwater from his dark hair. I know, I whispered. I hate tonight too. My hands only started shaking after he was dry. It made me angry not because I was shaking, but because I had waited for a moment when no one could see it. For months, I had performed calmness for people who didn't deserve it. Calmness when Sterling skipped the birthing classes. Calmness when Vivienne told me a real Harrington wife didn't breastfeed in public. Calmness when Serafina started appearing in photos from locations Sterling had called business trips. I had been so terrified of becoming the bitter wife that I had become the silent one. My phone buzzed again. Sterling. Where are you? Sterling. Bring Ronan home. Sterling. My mother is upset. I let out a short, hollow laugh. It sounded bizarre in the quiet room. His mother was upset. Not my son, whose stroller was in a puddle. Not me, standing in the rain while his mistress played Lady of the Manor. His mother. Another text came through. Sterling, you're acting unstable. Don't force me to take legal action. There it was, the first threat. I took a screenshot. Then I opened our joint banking app. The Harrington family ledger was as familiar to me as an ache that never healed. The estate mortgage, the staff payroll, Vivienne's medical concierge, the landscaping, the wine cellar maintenance, Sterling's club dues, the charitable donations in the Harrington name. My personal trust account had been plugging the holes in their budget for 2 years. At first, Sterling called them temporary loans. Then, contributions to the family. Once Ronan arrived, he stopped asking and simply expected the transfers to clear. I tapped on recurring payments. Harrington Family Trust, $25,000 monthly. Vivienne Harrington Personal, $15,000 monthly. Harrington Holdings Reserve Line, $100,000 quarterly. I stared at the numbers. Then I canceled every single scheduled transfer, one by one. Cancel. Confirm. Cancel. Confirm. Cancel. Confirm. With every tap, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like pulling my hand off a hot stove. My father called 20 minutes later. Are you in the room? Yes. The door is locked. Good. Rosalind Mercer is in the lobby. That name made me sit up straighter. Rosalind Mercer was one of the most ruthless family law attorneys on the East Coast. I had met her once at a Vance Foundation gala. She wore dark suits, spoke softly, and absolutely terrified men who mistook volume for power. Dad, I said, I can't let this turn into a public war. I have a baby. It became a war the second he threatened custody, my father replied. I closed my eyes. He said I was unstable. Of course he did. That's what weak men call women who stop complying. My throat tightened. For years, I had resented my father for not accepting Sterling. Tonight, his certainty felt like a hand holding me steady. About the house, I said. I checked some old emails. 18 months ago, Harrington Holdings used the estate as collateral for a private, short-term bridge loan. They've missed payments. The lender was looking for a clean exit. I sat numb. Sterling had told me the property was secure. Sterling had lied. A siren wailed outside the window. Ronan kicked his leg under the hotel blanket. What does buying the debt mean? I asked. It means the promissory note and mortgage are now controlled by Vance Capital. Since they are already in default, we control the path to foreclosure. The previous lender was ready to pull the trigger. I tensed. Dad, I don't want you fighting my divorce for me. I'm not fighting your divorce. I am acquiring a distressed real estate asset. Despite everything, I almost smiled. It was so perfectly Thaddeus Vance. It just so happens to be the house where some woman threw my grandson's stroller into the rain. Silence hummed on the line. I looked at Ronan. He had fallen back asleep. His tiny mouth relaxed. I should have called you sooner, I said. Yes, my father said. You should have. The honesty stung, but it wasn't cruel. Then he added, but you called tonight. That's all that matters. There was a knock at the door. I froze. Alara, my father said. Look through the peephole. I took my phone with me. Standing in the hallway was a woman in a camel coat holding a leather briefcase. Behind her stood hotel security. It's Rosalind. Let her in. Put me on speaker. Rosalind Mercer walked in as if she had stepped out of a courtroom and straight into the hurricane she had been expecting. She was in her late 40s, silver threading through her dark hair, her eyes entirely unbothered. Mrs. Harrington, she said. Vance, I corrected before I could stop myself. Her expression didn't change, but something like approval flickered in her eyes. Miss Vance, then. For the first time in years, someone had used my maiden name, and it felt like a door unlocking. Rosalind sat at the desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I need a timeline, she said. Start from the moment you arrived at the estate. I told her everything. The gates, the robe, the insults, the stroller, Sterling's words, Vivienne watching, Callum at the gatehouse, the photos, the voice recording, the text messages. Rosalind took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she held out her hand. May I see the photograph? I handed her my phone. Her jaw tightened when she saw the stroller in the mud. This is useful, she said. Useful sounds cynical. Evidence often starts out cynical. She forwarded the image to a secure server and asked for the audio file. Then she looked at the text from my husband. He's already threatened legal action, she noted. Good. Very good. It shows his first instinct was control, not the welfare of his child. I looked down at Ronan. Can he take him? Not today. Tomorrow morning, we file for temporary emergency custody and exclusive decision-making authority pending a hearing. We will also request that any visitation be strictly supervised, given the incident at the gates and his failure to protect the child from a hostile environment. The stroller was empty, I said. The child was present. You were forced to shield him from the elements while his father escalated a conflict. The pediatrician will document this. I nodded slowly. Rosalind's pen started moving again. Do you have access to the family's financial records? Yes. Download everything. Wire transfers, renovations, staff payroll, any payments to Serafina Thorne or corporate entities linked to her. She's an interior designer, I said. Or calls herself one. There might be invoices. A cold memory washed over me. Last spring, Sterling had asked me to sign off on a budget approval to update the East Wing. He said Vivienne wanted to refresh the guest suites for the family anniversary. I had signed it between nursing Ronan and battling exhaustion. What if I signed something I didn't read carefully? Rosalind looked at me. Then we mitigate it. We don't panic until we see the paper. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was Vivienne. Rosalind gestured for me to answer and put it on speaker. I did. Vivienne didn't bother saying hello. You have humiliated my son enough for one evening. I stared at the phone. Rosalind picked up her pen. Vivienne continued. Lest you forget, this is an internal family matter. Tomorrow morning, you will return, apologize to Serafina for your outburst, and end this absurdity before the social circles hear of it. My voice came out dead. Serafina threw my son's stroller into the rain. Don't be vulgar. It is merely a thing. It belonged to Ronan. That child is a Harrington. It would serve you well to remember that. Something inside me sharpened. No, I said. He is an infant. And it would serve you well to remember that. A stunned silence followed. Then Vivienne said, Sterling never should have married a woman so far beneath his emotional pedigree. My father, still quietly on speaker from Rosalind's phone, spoke for the first time. Tread carefully. Vivienne. The silence that followed was worth every year I had spent swallowing her insults. Vivienne's voice shifted. Thaddeus. This is none of your concern. My daughter and my grandson are my concern. She inhaled sharply. My father said, "Speak to Alara again without counsel present, and you will regret it in writing." The call disconnected. Rosalind looked at me. That was also useful. I almost laughed again. Then my father said, "Alara, the term sheet is signed." My pulse slowed. What does that mean? It means the original lender accepted the buyout. Vance Capital controls the mortgage on the estate as of tonight. Everything moves fast from here. I looked at the rain-streaked window. Across the state, Sterling was still standing inside a mansion he believed proved my powerlessness. By midnight? I asked. By midnight, my father confirmed. They just don't know it yet. I didn't sleep. Ronan slept. In short, restless bursts, curled into a tiny warm ball against my side. Every time he sighed, I opened my eyes. Every time my phone lit up, my stomach twisted before I reminded myself that fear was not a strategy. By 6 a.m., Sterling had sent 14 messages. "You're overreacting. My mother is willing to forgive you if you apologize. Do not involve your father. Serafina is crying because of what you did. Bring Ronan home." I saved them all. At 7:15 a.m., Rosalind returned with coffee, a portable scanner, and a draft of a court petition that was already half-written. My father sent a black car with a properly installed infant seat and a driver who asked no questions. By 8 a.m., for the first time in 3 years, I was sitting in the executive boardroom of Vance Capital. The building hadn't changed. White marble, silent elevators, fresh orchids arranged with expensive restraint. My father's world had always been controlled, polished, and strategic. At 26, I had run away from it to Sterling because I thought love was supposed to feel warmer than legacy. Now, sitting behind glass walls with my sleeping son beside me, I saw the difference between control and safety. My father walked in with 2 corporate attorneys and a file thick enough to steal the breath from my lungs. He stopped when he saw Ronan. For a moment, Thaddeus Vance stopped being the man feared across Wall Street. He was a grandfather seeing his grandson after too many months of pride and distance. "May I?" he asked. I nodded. He touched one finger to Ronan's tiny foot through the blanket, as if asking the baby's permission, too. "He looks like you," he said. "Sterling says he looks like a Harrington." My father's face darkened. "Sterling says a great many things that are untrue." One of the attorneys slid the documents across the table. "Here is where we stand," she said. Harrington Holdings pledged the Greenwich estate as collateral for a private bridge loan. They missed 2 payments. The lender had the right to call the debt. Vance Capital purchased that paper last night. I scanned the page. Numbers, dates, notices of default. Sterling had hidden all of it. The estate wasn't secure. It was bleeding cash. "What happens next?" I asked. "The official notice of default goes out today," the attorney said. "They will have a brief cure period, but based on their liquidity, they cannot cover the balloon payment without outside capital. We can initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately. Given the waiver clauses in the original loan, control transfers quickly. Can they fight it? They can try, but it will open their entire financial structure to discovery." My father sat across from me. "This is your call," he said. "I bought the debt because speed mattered. What we do with it now is up to you." I looked at him closely. "Don't make me the person who ruins people just because I'm hurt. I couldn't if I tried. That's not who you are." "I want safety for Ronan," I said. "I want the truth on the record. I want a divorce. I want every dollar I poured into that family accounted for. I want Serafina out of my robe and out of my son's nursery." "Reasonable," Rosalind said. My father gave a single nod. "Then that is what we execute." My phone rang. Sterling. Rosalind gestured for me to answer. I put it on speaker. "Alara," Sterling barked. "Where the hell are you?" "With a lawyer?" A pause. "What?" "Do not call me unless it concerns Ronan and can be documented in writing." He let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You hired a lawyer because Serafina moved a stroller? Because you chose your mistress over your child in front of witnesses. Do not use that word. Serafina isn't the problem here." "No," I said. "You are." Silence stretched across the room. Sterling's voice dropped an octave. "You need to think very carefully if you're going to turn this into a custody fight. I will make sure everyone knows you abandoned the marital home. I left after your girlfriend threw our son's belongings into the rain, and you told me to apologize. You can't prove abandonment. I looked at Rosalind. She raised an eyebrow. I answered, Are you sure? Sterling didn't reply immediately. Then he said, My mother wants to hold a family meeting tonight. No, it wasn't a request. You will come to the house. I looked at the file in front of me, at the notice of default, at the Harrington name printed above a debt they couldn't pay. No, Sterling. I will come to that property when my attorney advises it is necessary. What does that mean? It means you should check your email. I ended the call before he could respond. My father almost smiled. Rosalind didn't. She was already typing. Try not to be too theatrical, she advised. It's tempting, but unnecessary. I know. Excellent. We win by being boring and precise. Boring and precise became my armor. That afternoon, I took Ronan to Dr. Miriam Hayes. She examined him, documented mild exposure to the elements, recorded my statement about the incident, and asked, Do you feel safe returning home? That question nearly broke me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was routine, a checkbox on a form, a question asked of women when the world has already quietly betrayed them. No, I said. I don't. She looked at me with professional gentleness. Then I will put that on the record. After the appointment, I sat in the car and opened my email archives. Search, Serafina Thorne. Nothing at first. Then I typed Thorne Design Studio. 3 results populated. 1 invoice for $40,000. 1 for $75,000. 1 for $120,000. All paid from the family trust account I had funded. Project title, East Wing Renovation. My hands went numb. Sterling had moved Serafina into the East Wing. I had paid for the very rooms where my husband slept with his mistress. I didn't scream. I watched New York traffic blur past the windshield while something hard settled deep inside my chest. Then, I forwarded every invoice to Rosalind. Her reply came quickly. Keep digging. So I dug. I found receipts for jewelry disguised as client gifts, hotel invoices coded as business dinners, a security deposit for a luxury apartment lease in Serafina's name, a wire transfer from the Harrington account 2 days before my baby shower. The betrayal hadn't started with a kiss. It had started with accounting. That evening, a courier delivered the official notice of default to the Greenwich estate. Sterling called 6 times afterward. I didn't answer a single one. At 9:40 p.m., he texted, What have you done? I looked at Ronan, sleeping peacefully in the bassinet my father had arranged. Then another text. My mother is having a panic attack. Serafina says you're trying to destroy us. I typed a single sentence. No, Sterling, I just stopped funding you, but I didn't send it. Instead, I deleted the text and sent nothing. Because silence, when freely chosen, is not weakness. It is a locked door. Near midnight, Rosalind forwarded the final packet. Vance Capital officially controlled the debt. The Greenwich estate was no longer a symbol of Sterling's power. It was a distressed asset in my father's hands, and soon, it would be in mine to decide its fate. A minute later, Sterling texted again, You will apologize to Serafina tomorrow. I stared at the screen until it went dark. Then I finally sent my first reply. Preserve all security camera footage from the property between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. yesterday. Deletion or alteration of files will result in spoliation of evidence charges. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Then Sterling replied, You are a stupid woman. I saved it too. I returned to the estate 2 days later alongside my attorney, a commercial real estate inspector, and a sleeping infant. Not because Sterling summoned me, but because Vance Capital had ordered an inspection of the collateral's interior and exterior condition per the terms of the defaulted loan. That distinction mattered. As the black SUV turned onto the long private drive, my chest tightened despite everything. The Harrington mansion loomed ahead, all pale stone and cold windows, beautiful in the way that cages sometimes are. I had once stood in its foyer in a white dress while Sterling whispered that I belonged here. Now, the gates opened for me because leverage demanded it. Callum stood at the gatehouse. His face was pale. Seeing me, he stepped out into the mist. Mrs. Harrington, he said, then quickly corrected himself. Miss Vance. That tiny correction nearly stripped my composure. Callum, I said. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About that night, I should have said something. Yes, I agreed. You should have. He lowered his eyes, then said, I backed up the footage. The air shifted. My attorney, Rosalind, turned slightly. Callum glanced toward the main house. The system overrides after 7 days unless manually archived. Mr. Harrington told me to clip a specific segment and send it to him. I made a full copy before I executed the order. Why? I asked. Because the stroller was for the baby, he said. And because she laughed. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Rosalind handed him her business card. Call me this afternoon. Do not send anything else to anyone. He nodded. The front door swung open before we reached the steps. Vivienne Harrington stood there in pearls, navy silk, and absolute fury. Behind her, Serafina leaned against the banister wearing a white cable-knit sweater I recognized because it was mine. Sterling stood by the fireplace, holding a crystal tumbler, performing authority in the hopes it would make it real. Alara, Vivienne snapped. This is highly inappropriate. I adjusted Ronan's blanket. Good morning. Do not good morning me. You are bringing strangers into this house. Rosalind stepped forward. Rosalind Mercer, counsel for Miss Vance. This is Mr. Evans, an inspector retained by the lien holder. Sterling frowned. The lien holder? Serafina let out a sharp laugh. What kind of theater is this? I looked at her. You're wearing my sweater. Her cheeks flushed. Sterling set down his glass. Alara, enough. I didn't answer him. The inspector opened his tablet. We are here to document the condition of the collateral per the access clauses of the mortgage agreement. Vivienne's face changed. She understood the language of money much faster than the language of morality. What lien holder? She demanded. Rosalind handed Sterling a packet of documents. He opened it with visible annoyance. Then he froze. Vivienne snatched the first page from him. Serafina peered over her shoulder. The room became deathly quiet. Sterling looked at me. You brought your father into this? No, I said. You brought creditors into this when you over-leveraged the house and defaulted. Serafina blinked. Defaulted? She looked at Vivienne. Shut up, Vivienne snapped at her. That told me Serafina had known nothing. Excellent. Sterling took a step closer. This is a family matter. It was a family matter when your mistress threw our son's stroller into the rain. Serafina's mouth pinched. I told you. I barely touched it. I looked at Callum, who had walked in behind us and stood near the doors. He looked back at me. I stayed silent. Sterling caught the exchange, and his face hardened. You will not use the staff against us. Rosalind's voice sliced through the tension. We will use witnesses, Mr. Harrington. Vivienne clutched the papers. This house has been in our family for generations. Then your family should have paid its debts, I said. Her eyes flashed. Arrogant girl. Once that would have wounded me. I used to want Vivienne to love me. I hosted her friends, memorized her dietary restrictions, ordered her favorite imported teas, and let her dictate how I held my own child because I thought patience could turn contempt into acceptance. Now I saw the truth. She never wanted a daughter-in-law. She wanted a quiet asset. The inspector began taking photos of the foyer. Serafina moved quickly toward the stairs. You can't go up there. Rosalind looked at her. Why? Because those are private quarters. All collateral is subject to inspection, Rosalind said. Sterling's voice turned sharp. No one is going into the East Wing. I turned to him. The East Wing. The invoices in my email burned in my mind. That is exactly where we are starting, I said. For a second, nobody moved. Then Ronan woke up and started to fuss. The sound cut through the room. My son's thin, reedy cry filled the foyer that had rejected him 2 nights ago. Serafina grimaced. Can you make him stop? I stared at her. Sterling hissed. Serafina, but it was too late. Rosalind heard it. Callum heard it. The inspector heard it. Vivienne closed her eyes. I smiled without warmth. He's an infant, I said. Not background noise. I carried Ronan upstairs myself. The East Wing was completely transformed. The light, airy guest suites had been converted into a powder gold apartment with velvet armchairs, mirrored trays, crystal perfume bottles, and framed photos of Serafina. In one photo, she and Sterling were on a beach in Palm Beach. The date stamp was 8 weeks after Ronan was born. In another, They were at a ski lodge in Aspen the week Sterling said he had to visit a problematic vendor. I stood in the doorway, feeling the last, thin thread between us snap. Serafina pushed past me, snatching the frames. These are private. Just like my relationship. Sterling said my name, not sharply this time. Almost warningly. Almost pleadingly. I ignored him. The inspector photographed everything. The custom built-ins, the imported wallpaper, the marble bathroom fixtures, the exclusive lighting, all paid for by invoices I had funded. Document the art too, Rosalind murmured. Serafina spun on Sterling. You said she didn't care about the money. I looked at him. He told her that. Of course he did. Men like Sterling always need their mistresses to believe the wife is cold, greedy, hysterical, or entirely absent. It gives the theft a romantic flair. Sterling's face mottled red. This isn't the time. No, I said. The time was before you used my trust fund to furnish her bedroom. Vivienne inhaled sharply. Serafina stared at him. Her trust fund? Sterling didn't answer. The lack of an answer was enough. Downstairs, Vivienne tried one last tactic. Alara, she said, softening her voice to something almost maternal. You're exhausted. You have a newborn. This is a painful misunderstanding. But a divorce will damage Ronan. A boy needs his family name. I looked down at my son. He had fallen back asleep, one tiny fist tucked under his chin. A boy needs adults who don't use his last name to justify cruelty. Vivienne's softness vanished. You think your father's money makes you invincible? No, I said. My decision to stop covering your debts does. Sterling followed me to the door. Alara, wait. I paused on the threshold. Behind him, Serafina stood halfway up the stairs. The smugness was completely gone. Vivienne was gripping the notice of default as if it had personally insulted her. Sterling lowered his voice. Come home, we can negotiate terms. I looked past his shoulder at the wet driveway. The stroller wasn't there. Did you order Ronan's stroller to be thrown away? Of course. It looked terrible. I almost admired the clarity of it. Not because it was right, but because it explained everything. You removed the evidence from the pavement, I said. But not the woman who threw it there. His jaw locked. Do you realize how bad this will look for you? He asked. He leaned closer. Do you realize how lonely you'll be if you don't stop? There it was, the old weapon. Fear. I stepped out into the cold air. Lonely as standing in the rain with my son while my husband protects another woman. I walked down the steps. This time, Callum opened the gates before I even reached them. As I passed the booth, he said quietly, Miss Vance. I turned. I'll call your lawyer today. Thank you. Behind me, Sterling was shouting my name, but the gates were already closing. Dr. Miriam Hayes didn't dramatize what happened, which made her notes infinitely more devastating. She checked Ronan's lungs, his temperature, his skin, his breathing. She asked how long he had been in the rain, if he was dressed for the weather, if I had access to safe housing, and if anyone had threatened to take him from me. I answered everything. When I mentioned Sterling's claim that I was not taking his son anywhere, Dr. Hayes stopped writing for a half-second, then continued. Do you believe he might use custody to control you? She asked. Yes. Has he been a primary caregiver? No. Does he know Ronan's feeding schedule? I looked down at my hands. No. Medications? Safe sleep protocols? No. No. Shame washed over me, thick and sudden, even though it didn't belong to me. I had convinced myself Sterling would be more involved when work slowed down, when Ronan slept more, when I asked in the right tone of voice, when Vivienne stopped interfering, when Serafina vanished from the periphery of our lives. I had built scaffolding around a collapsing building. Dr. Hayes looked at me gently. Miss Vance, documenting reality is not an attack. It is a defense. I nodded. Defense. That word became my religion for the next week. Not revenge. Not punishment. Defense. Rosalind filed the ex parte motion for emergency temporary custody the next morning. The petition included the gate incident, Sterling's text messages, the medical report, and a request for an order preventing either parent from taking Ronan out of the state without written consent. Sterling retaliated through an attorney named Alistair Graves, who sent a letter dripping with polished lies. Mrs. Harrington voluntarily abandoned the marital residence. Mrs. Harrington is displaying signs of postpartum instability. Mr. Harrington is gravely concerned for the child's welfare. I read the letter 3 times, then set it on the desk, and took a picture of Ronan sleeping in his bassinet next to me. Postpartum instability. That was what they called a mother walking out of the rain. Rosalind wasn't surprised. It's standard playbook, she said. Dirty, but standard. How do we respond? With paper. For an entire day, we built the timeline. My hospital discharge, Ronan's birth certificate, pediatric visits where I was the only parent present, pharmacy receipts, invoices from the lactation consultant, grocery delivery logs. The bills for the night nurse, those first 2 weeks paid from my account after Sterling refused, claiming women have managed babies since the dawn of time. Then, the financial forensics. Rosalind's paralegal created columns. Household expenses paid by Alara. Personal expenses paid by Alara. Harrington obligations paid by Alara. Transfers linked to Serafina Thorne. The last column grew the fastest. The apartment deposit. Jewelry. Travel. Design invoices. A private chef for a client dinner on a weekend. Sterling said he was at a board retreat. Spa treatments. A charge at a high-end baby boutique that made me stop breathing for a second. A baby boutique. Serafina didn't have a child. The receipt was for a cashmere infant blanket. I remembered asking Sterling why he came home with a shopping bag from that store. He said it was a gift for a colleague. I believed him because I was too tired to doubt him. Rosalind watched my face. Do you need a break? No. I repeated it. No. I need to know exactly what my marriage cost me. And we kept digging. That evening, my father came to the apartment he had leased for me. It wasn't one of his ultra-luxury penthouses. I had immediately rejected that. It was a quiet, furnished, 2-bedroom near the pediatrician. Doorman, secure, but unpretentious. He brought soup, diapers, and a small plush elephant. I don't know what infants like, he admitted. They like being dry, fed, and left out of power plays. He looked at me for a long time. You sound exactly like your mother. My mother died when I was 19. Some grief hides under the floorboards of your life. You forget it's there until someone steps on the exact right spot. I took the elephant. She would have hated Sterling. She would have seen through him faster than I did. I resented you for seeing through him. I know. He sat across from me while Ronan slept in my arms. I shouldn't have made you choose between love and my warnings, he said. My throat tightened. You didn't make me choose. I just made a bad choice. You made a choice with hope. They are different things. For the first time since the incident at the gates, I cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically, just tears spilling over my face while Ronan breathed against my chest and my father sat close enough to anchor me, but far enough away not to push. After a while, he said, The foreclosure is moving forward. Their attorney requested a meeting. Do you want me in the room? I wiped my face. No. He nodded, accepting it. Then I will wait outside. That was how he showed love, when he got it right. The next morning, Callum met Rosalind in a parking garage 2 blocks from the courthouse and handed her a flash drive. I wasn't there, Rosalind told me later, because she didn't want Sterling accusing me of coercing the staff. The video was perfectly clear. Serafina at the gates, her hand on the stroller, her face alight with contempt. The shove. The crash. Sterling watching. Me standing in the rain with Ronan. Sterling telling me to apologize. The audio was imperfect, but usable. My stomach twisted as Rosalind played it in her office. Living through humiliation is one thing, watching it is another. When you live it, your body protects you with adrenaline. When you watch it, you see the full, unfiltered scope of what other people felt entitled to do to you. Serafina laughed after the stroller hit the pavement. That laugh changed everything. It stripped the act of any plausible deniability. Rosalind paused the video. This plays... Can Sterling claim it's doctored? He can claim the moon is made of glass. It won't help him. I almost smiled when her forensic accountant, Imogen, walked in holding a new file. We found something, she said. Rosalind opened it and froze. What is it? I asked. She turned the page toward me. It was a durable power of attorney form, dated 7 months ago, when I was in my 3rd trimester. My signature was at the bottom, granting Sterling broad authority to authorize household and estate expenditures from the family's reserve trust. I remembered signing a proxy to approve nursery renovations and staff payroll while I was on bed rest. But this document was broad. Massive. That is not what I signed, I said. Rosalind's eyes narrowed. Are you certain? Yes, I signed a single page. Not this. And my signature. I leaned closer. It's close, but the loop on the E is wrong. Rosalind closed the file. Then we have a new problem. What problem? Suspected forgery. My phone buzzed. A text from Sterling. No need for court. Come to dinner tonight. Bring Ronan. We can settle this privately. I looked at the forged signature, then at the frozen frame of the video where Serafina laughed in the rain. I typed a single sentence in reply. All communication must go through counsel. And this time, I hit send. Money leaves a ghost, even when the love is gone. That was the first thing Rosalind said when we started matching the invoices. At the time, I thought she meant bank statements, routing numbers, and vendor codes. By the end of the week, I realized she meant something much more painful. Money showed priorities. Sterling skipped Ronan's 2-month well-child checkup because of an emergency board meeting. That exact day, he paid for Serafina's $800 facial. Sterling told me the Harrington Trust couldn't reimburse my out-of-pocket costs for Vivienne's premium medical concierge because cash flow was tight. The day before, he wired the deposit for a beachfront villa in Palm Beach for Serafina. Sterling complained the night nurse was a frivolous luxury. He spent double her weekly salary on a Cartier bracelet Serafina wore in one of her Instagram posts. Every line item answered a question I had once been too terrified to ask. Where were you? With her? Why were you distant? Because I was a convenience, not a desire. Why did you get angry when I asked about the budget? Because you were spending my money. I sat at the conference table with a highlighter, marking every transaction linked to Serafina. Yellow for confirmed. Pink for suspicious. Blue for Harrington family obligations I covered while Sterling diverted their actual funds. By noon, the pages looked like a massive bruise. Imogen tapped a specific contract. This one is crucial. The East Wing renovation. Thorne Design Studio invoiced Harrington Holdings, but the payment cleared through the reserve account which you funded. Can we prove that? Yes. The capital infusion is a direct trace. Your transfers hit on the 1st of the month. The outbound wires left on the 3rd. I looked at the invoice again. Custom headboards, imported Italian linens, a built-in vanity, silk wall panels. I thought of Serafina standing in my sweater, guarding that room. She knew, I said. Imogen didn't soften it. At minimum, she knew the payments were coming from family accounts. And Sterling knew those accounts were floated by you. Yes. The word fell heavy, leaving no room for excuses. Later that afternoon, Rosalind set up a video conference with Alistair Graves. Sterling insisted on being present. I joined from Rosalind's office. Ronan was with my father in the adjacent room. Sterling appeared on screen in his home office, the one with the leather-bound law books he never read and the oil portrait of his grandfather behind him. Alistair sat beside him, looking tense. He looked like a man who already regretted taking the retainer. Rosalind started. We are here to discuss a temporary parenting schedule, financial disclosures, and the preservation of evidence. Sterling leaned toward the camera. Alara, this is absurd. You are letting your father turn a marital dispute into a hostile corporate takeover. I folded my hands. It isn't a marital dispute. Serafina assaulted my son's property, and you protected her. You can't assault property, he snapped. No, I said. But a judge will understand the definition of malice. Alistair cleared his throat. Let's remain constructive. Rosalind shifted to her calmest tone. We are requesting full financial disclosure of all payments made to Serafina Thorne Design Studio, and any affiliated LLCs. Sterling laughed. Absolutely not. Alistair's face tightened. Rosalind continued. We are also requesting the original, wet ink version of the durable power of attorney dated March 18th. Sterling's expression shifted. Barely, but I knew him. I had seen that face lie about hotel receipts, late nights, and lipstick. His anger always flared fastest when fear arrived first. What power of attorney? He asked. Rosalind smiled politely. The one you relied upon to authorize extended capital drafts from the family reserve. Alistair turned to him. Sterling? Sterling avoided the camera lens. I'll have to check my files. I leaned forward. No, you won't. His eyes darted to mine. On March 18th, I was 7 months pregnant, I said. I was on bed rest. You brought me a single page to sign to release funds for the nursery contractors and the household staff. You stood by the bed and called me paranoid when I tried to read the fine print. His mouth opened slightly. The document your office provided is 4 pages long, I continued. I did not sign those clauses. Alistair froze. Sterling's voice dropped. Watch yourself. You're accusing me of a felony. I am stating facts regarding my signature. Rosalind added, We will be submitting the document to a forensic handwriting expert. Alistair muted the microphone on their end. Sterling's face contorted before the screen went blank. I leaned back in my chair. My heart was hammering, but my hands were still. 5 minutes later, Alistair unmuted. My client will review his records and respond through counsel. And your client must preserve all originals, Rosalind reminded him. The call ended. I exhaled. Rosalind looked at me. Excellent work. I wanted to scream, but you didn't. Does it matter? It matters more than you know. That evening, Serafina posted a photo on Instagram. A slightly blurred shot of the grand staircase at the Greenwich estate. Her hand resting gracefully on the banister. The caption read, Some women leave because they lack the grace to stay. Others remain because they finally found where they belong. I stared at it, then took a screenshot. Within 10 minutes, the comments poured in. So elegant. You deserve happiness. Some people are just bitter. I knew what she was doing. She was building the public narrative before mine reached a courtroom. In her version, she was a woman full of grace. I was the hysterical wife. Sterling was trapped in a miserable marriage. Ronan didn't exist. I sent the screenshot to Rosalind. Her reply was instant. Excellent addition to the defamation file. I put my phone face down and looked at Ronan, sleeping under the plush elephant my father brought. You will never be invisible to me, I whispered. The next morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. It's Callum, from the gatehouse, the voice said. I apologize for bothering you. Ice spiked in my chest. What happened? Mr. Harrington fired me. I closed my eyes. I am so sorry. He said I betrayed the family. You told the truth. Yes. And that's why I'm calling. There's something else. I sat up straight. What do you mean? The day before the incident at the gates, Serafina arrived with moving boxes. Mr. Harrington told the staff she would be staying in the East Wing indefinitely. Mrs. Harrington told us not to mention it to you because you were fragile after the birth. Fragile. There was that word again. Not betrayed. Not deceived. Fragile. Can you put that in a sworn affidavit? I asked. Yes. His voice dropped lower. And inside the portico overhang, there is a second security camera. It records audio. I stopped breathing. Does Sterling know? No, Callum said. It was installed after some packages went missing last year. The family forgot about it. I closed my eyes. Finally, a witness the Harringtons couldn't train, buy, or intimidate. Callum, I said. Call Rosalind right now. The Harrington Foundation's annual charity gala was supposed to be Sterling's salvation. He needed the donors. He needed the sympathy. He needed the old New York families to gather under the chandeliers of the Pierre Hotel and pretend that debt was merely strategy and scandal was merely a rumor. So he brought Serafina. Of course he did. He walked into the grand ballroom with her hand resting on his arm. She wore an emerald gown with a plunging neckline and a smile polished for the society photographers. She was wearing the Cartier bracelet from the receipt I had highlighted in yellow. My money was sparkling on her wrist. For a moment, the room tilted. Then the whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. That's Serafina Thorne. Where's Alara? I heard she walked out with the baby. Postpartum breakdown. Clearly, I was standing near the side entrance, listening. Rosalind had advised me not to come if I couldn't keep my temper. My father had advised me not to come unless I had a specific objective. I had both. The Vance Foundation was listed as the primary underwriter of the gala, though no one had bothered to ask if I still approved it. For years, Sterling had used my family's name quietly, carefully. Never too loudly because he didn't want people to know how much he needed it. Tonight, I decided precision mattered. I wore a black gown. Simple, high-necked, no wedding ring, no flashy jewelry. My hair was pinned back. My father walked beside me, not in front of me. The whispering changed instantly. Sterling saw us from across the room. The color drained from his face, replaced rapidly by a flush of anger. Serafina followed his gaze. Her smile froze. Vivienne materialized beside them, gripping Sterling's arm. I could read her lips. What is she doing here? I almost smiled. For once, I wasn't the one being asked to explain myself. The gala chairwoman, Constance Whitmore, rushed toward my father with such palpable relief it was almost embarrassing. Thaddeus, we are so honored you could make it. My father looked at me. I stepped forward. Constance. I need to clarify something before the program begins. Her smile faltered. Of course. The Vance Foundation will not be underwriting tonight's fundraiser. The blood vanished from her face. Vivienne appeared beside us, summoned by the scent of vanishing capital. Alara, she hissed through her teeth. This is neither the time nor the place. I turned to her. This is exactly the place. My family's foundation is plastered on the sponsor wall. Sterling arrived, Serafina a half step behind him. Don't do this, he muttered under his breath. I stared at him. Don't do what? Correct the record? Serafina lifted her chin. This is so pathetic. I glanced at her bracelet. So is wearing jewelry bought with another woman's trust fund. Yet here we are. Her face went blotchy. Sterling grabbed my elbow. The immediate vicinity went dead silent. My father took a half step forward. Sterling dropped my arm instantly. I didn't rub it. I didn't step back. Touch me again, I said softly, and this gets much simpler. Sterling's jaw worked furiously. Are you trying to destroy my family? No. I'm refusing to finance it. Constance looked like she might faint. Rosalind, who had slipped in behind us, handed the chairwoman a formal letter. Notice of funding withdrawal and a request to amend promotional materials, Rosalind said smoothly. And given the pending financial audits regarding Harrington Holdings, we advise the Foundation Board to seek independent review before accepting funds marked as charitable. That sentence did more damage than screaming ever could. Several board members drifted closer. Vivienne's face was ashen. How dare you? I finally looked her dead in the eye. I dared after your guest threw my infant stroller into a rainstorm and you called it vulgarity. Someone gasped. Serafina snapped. That is not what happened. Rosalind opened her tablet. Would you like to state that on the record? Sterling looked at the tablet and understood. Not the specifics. But enough. Serafina, he said sharply. Be quiet. Too late, Constance whispered. What stroller? I didn't answer. I wasn't there to turn my son's humiliation into a cocktail party anecdote. I will not protect the people who orchestrated it, I said. My counsel will provide the documentation to the relevant authorities. I am only here tonight to make it clear that Vance money will no longer be used to polish Harrington lies. The silence that followed was intoxicating. Then my father spoke. The Vance Foundation remains committed to the Children's Hospital. Tomorrow morning, we will wire our entire pledged amount directly to the hospital, bypassing the Harrington Foundation entirely. Constance clutched the letter. The board members were whispering again, but the tone had shifted entirely. Sterling heard it too. He leaned toward me. Alara, please. It was his first please. It didn't move me. Serafina took a step away from him, a tiny detail, but glaring. I saw the moment she realized Sterling wasn't a prince who had chosen her over a boring wife. He was a man standing on a foundation of debt, scandal, and another woman's money. You told me she was cut off, Serafina hissed at him. Sterling turned on her. Not now. You said her father hated her. She spat. Now the entire room was watching them. I almost felt sorry for Serafina. Almost. Then I remembered the sound of the stroller hitting the wet asphalt. No. Some women make mistakes. Some women look at an infant and still choose cruelty. Serafina had made her choice. The program began 20 minutes late. Sterling tried to salvage it. He stood at the podium and spoke about legacy, family, and responsibility. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. I stood near the back doors with Rosalind. When he said, "The Harrington name has always meant protection," I turned and walked out. The society photographers caught it, and so did half the room. Outside, the cold air felt clean. My father followed me out. "Are you all right?" "No." He nodded. "Are you glad you came?" I looked back through the glass doors. Inside, Sterling was still giving his speech, still playing his part, still pretending he hadn't lost control of the room. Yes, my phone buzzed. Rosalind checked hers too. She read the screen, then smiled. "What is it?" I asked. "The financial crimes investigator assigned to the forgery case wants a meeting." I looked at the ballroom. At Serafina standing alone near the bar. At Sterling gripping the podium. At Vivienne trying to smile while donors avoided her eyes. For years, I had been terrified of public embarrassment. Tonight, I learned something vital. The truth only embarrasses the people who built their lives on lies. Family court didn't look like vengeance. It looked like beige walls in Lower Manhattan, exhausted parents, a bad coffee machine, and women clutching manila folders with both hands because paper was the only thing keeping their lives from being willfully misinterpreted. I arrived early with Rosalind. Ronan stayed with my father in a court-approved waiting area. Sterling arrived 20 minutes later in a navy suit, clean-shaven, holding a leather portfolio, and wearing his wedding ring. The sight of that ring almost made me laugh. He hadn't worn it consistently in months. Now, in a courthouse, he was displaying it as a prop. Serafina wasn't with him. Vivienne was. She sat behind him with a ramrod-straight spine and pursed lips, as if posture could still command the room. Seeing me, Sterling softened his expression into something rehearsed. "Alara," he said, "we don't have to do this." I looked at the ring on his finger. "You should have remembered that at the gates." His face tightened. Alistair Graves pulled him aside before he could respond. The hearing began with temporary custody. Not the divorce, not the money, Ronan. That focus helped me breathe. Alistair spoke first. He painted Sterling as a concerned father blindsided by my emotional departure from the marital home. He used the phrase postpartum stress 3 times. He claimed Sterling wanted broad visitation, joint decision-making, and the immediate return of the child to the family residence. Then Rosalind stood up. She didn't call Sterling a monster. She didn't call Serafina a homewrecker. She didn't call Vivienne cruel. She used dates. April 3rd. The child's pediatric checkup. Mother present, father absent. Exhibit A. April 10th. Infant vaccinations. Mother present, father absent. Exhibit B. May 2nd. Mother requests reimbursement for a night nurse. Father denies request in writing. Email. Exhibit C. May 15th. Father spends the night away from the primary residence and later claims it was a business necessity. Hotel receipt. Exhibit D. Alistair objected. Rosalind smoothly pivoted. Then came the incident at the gates. The screen in the courtroom was lowered. Sterling's face changed before the video even started playing. I watched the judge, not the screen. Serafina appeared. I appeared with Ronan. The stroller rolled, tipped, crashed. The blanket hit the mud. Sterling stood safely under the overhang. My voice came through faintly. "Sterling, you just watched Serafina throw Ronan's stroller into the rain." Then Sterling's voice. "Put the phone away." The judge's expression didn't change. That was worse for Sterling. Then came the second camera. The audio was crisp. Serafina's voice filled the courtroom. "Maybe now she'll understand. This isn't a shelter for abandoned wives." I gripped my hands together under the table. Then Sterling. "Alara, you need to apologize." Vivienne stared straight ahead. Alistair looked like a man whose briefcase had just caught fire. The clip ended. No one spoke. Rosalind said, "The child was present. The mother evacuated the scene to protect him. The father failed to intervene, failed to check on the infant, and later threatened legal action when the mother sought safety." Alistair stood up slowly. "Your Honor, the stroller was empty." The judge looked at him. "Counselor, that is not the defense you think it is." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an eternity. Rosalind submitted Dr. Hayes' medical report. Then Sterling's texts. Then Callum's affidavit. Alistair tried to claim I had involved my father to financially punish Sterling. Rosalind handled it with one sentence. Financial matters are separate from the immediate safety of the child. But Mr. Harrington's attempt to characterize Miss Vance as unstable began hours after his failure to protect his child from a hostile adult. The judge looked directly at Sterling. "You told your wife she needed to apologize to Miss Thorne after the stroller incident." Sterling swallowed. Emotions were high. "That was not my question." Sterling looked at Alistair. Alistair couldn't help him. "Yes," Sterling said. "And what is your relationship to Miss Thorne?" Silence. Vivienne closed her eyes. "She is a close friend," Sterling said. Rosalind played the audio from the gala, captured by a hallway camera I didn't even know existed. Just a snippet. Serafina hissing. "You told me she was cut off." The judge looked at Sterling. "A close friend," she repeated flatly. Sterling turned purple. By the end of the hearing, the temporary order was brutal. I received primary physical custody. Sterling received supervised visitation twice a week at a family center, pending further evaluation. Neither of us could take Ronan out of state. All communication was restricted to a co-parenting app. Vivienne let out a soft sound behind him. Sterling whipped around, furious, but the ruling was already on the record. Outside the courtroom, he caught up to me near the elevators. For once, the polish had been completely stripped from his anger. "Are you happy now?" I looked at him. "No." "Then why are you doing this?" "Because happiness isn't the goal. Safety is." His face contorted. "You're taking my son away from me." "I am taking our son away from a woman you allowed to humiliate him, and the version of you who thought it was acceptable. You know I would never hurt Ronan." I looked at him for a long time. "Sterling, you already taught me that you can stand close enough to strike and call it distance." He flinched. For the first time, it looked real. The pain flashed across his features. "Alara," he said softly. "I made mistakes. I waited." He didn't say Serafina's name. He didn't say stroller. He didn't say rain. He didn't say I betrayed our child. So I stepped into the elevator. He put his hand on the door. "I miss my family." I looked at his wedding ring. "You miss when people believed you." The doors closed between us. The second time I stood at the gates of the Greenwich estate, the sky was clear, and it felt almost unfair. Some scenes should keep their weather. The first night had been rain, humiliation, and mud. This morning was sharp, brilliant blue, bright enough to expose every crack in the stone driveway. I arrived with Rosalind, a real estate agent, 2 court-martials, and a locksmith. Ronan was not with me. I had learned that protection sometimes means you don't bring your child to the battlefield just because they are the reason you are fighting. The cure period had expired. Harrington Holdings failed to post the capital. Vance Capital executed the deed in lieu of foreclosure faster than Sterling expected because Sterling spent too much time threatening me and not enough time reading his loan covenants. Legally, the mansion no longer belonged to him. Practically, today was the day everyone inside found out what that meant. Callum was gone from the gatehouse, fired for telling the truth. A temporary guard opened the gates after verifying the paperwork. He didn't know the history, and that helped. He treated us like any other legal entity with the proper authority. Vivienne came out first. She was wearing gray. I had never seen her in gray. Vivienne believed in navy, ivory, and deep jewel tones. Gray was for people who didn't expect to be photographed. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Rosalind handed her the notice. Vivienne refused to take it. The real estate agent spoke up. "We are here to take possession of the collateral. This is my home." This was collateral for a defaulted obligation. Her eyes darted to me. "Did you do this?" "No," I said. "Sterling did this when he leveraged it. I merely stopped paying for the illusion." The front doors opened again. Serafina walked out barefoot, wearing silk pajamas, holding a coffee cup. I looked at her and felt absolutely zero heat. No rage, no jealousy, just clarity. She had wanted to be the woman inside the mansion. Now she was. For another hour, maybe. "What's going on?" she asked. Vivienne turned on her. "Go upstairs." Serafina ignored her, looking past us at Sterling, who had just stepped out behind them. "Sterling?" Sterling's eyes locked onto mine. "You cannot evict my mother." "I am not evicting your mother," I said. "The new owner is taking possession." "They are different things." "You sound like your father." "Thank you." He recoiled as if I had struck him. A month ago, that insult would have made me defensive. Now, I accepted the inheritance of competence. The marshals explained the process. Personal belongings would be packed under supervision. Specific fixtures and estate assets could not be removed. The East Wing would be documented for damages. The staff had already been notified and received severance from the new management entity. Vivian started to shake not from sadness, but from the sheer impossibility that the rules applied to her. "This house is Harrington history," she said. I looked up at the windows. "I know. I spent years maintaining it while you reminded me I was a guest." Her lips thinned. "You were always a stranger." "No," I said. "I belonged to myself, and that is what bothered you." Serafina tried a different approach. "Alara," she said, lowering her voice, "this has gone too far." I almost admired her timing. "You threw my child's stroller into a storm." Her mouth tightened into a thin line. "Enough." Sterling stepped between us. "Enough." I looked at him. "Step aside." He didn't move. For one brief second, I saw the man he pretended to be when we first met. Handsome, assured, built of old manners and expensive prep schools. A man used to rooms rearranging themselves around him. Then one of the marshals said, "Sir, step aside." And Sterling moved. That was the exact moment the estate changed hands in my heart. Not when the paperwork was signed. Not when the lender accepted the bid. But when Sterling Harrington, who once told me I'd be lonely without him, stepped aside because someone with authority told him to. Inside, the house smelled different. Serafina's expensive candles had overpowered the old scent of cedar and lemon polish. Boxes lined the hallway of the East Wing. Clothes were draped over chairs. The door to the nursery was closed. I opened it myself. The room was exactly as I had left it, and completely wrong. The pale blue curtains, the white crib, the moon mobile, the nursing chair where I had rocked Ronan his first week home. On the dresser sat a vase of Serafina's roses. I walked over and moved it. Beneath it, a pale water ring stained the wood. I had picked that dresser with my mother in mind. Soft edges, warm finish. Something that could grow with a child. Rosalind stood in the doorway. "You don't have to do this part today." "No," I said, "I do." I opened the drawers. Half of Ronan's clothes were missing. Not packed, gone. His hospital bracelet, which I had kept in a small memory box, was also gone. My breath hitched. Sterling appeared behind Rosalind. "What did you do with Ronan's keepsake box?" I demanded. He frowned. "I don't know." I turned and walked back into the hallway toward Serafina. Her face fluttered before she composed herself. "Where is it?" I asked. "I have no idea." I walked past her into the East Wing suite. Serafina followed. "You can't just go through my things." "Your things are located on property you no longer have the right to occupy," Rosalind added, stepping in. "And if personal property of Miss Vance or the infant's keepsakes have been removed, that is a separate issue." In Serafina's room, the keepsake box was sitting on the vanity, tucked under a stack of magazines. I picked it up slowly. Inside was Ronan's hospital bracelet, his first knit hat, and the little card with his footprints. For a second, the room faded. This box wasn't expensive. It wasn't legally valuable. That was exactly why taking it was unforgivable. I looked at Serafina. "Why?" She crossed her arms, but her voice shook. "Sterling said you were sentimental about stupid things. I thought if you came back for it, he could talk to you." Sterling stared at her. "Serafina." I turned to him. "You used my son's first footprints as bait?" He didn't answer. There is a kind of silence that confesses more than words ever could. I closed the box and handed it to Rosalind. "Put it on the inventory." Serafina started crying then. Not because she was sorry, but because consequences had finally reached her side of the gates. By sunset, the Harringtons were gone. They weren't homeless. Sterling had a corporate apartment in the city. Vivian had friends with guest houses and enough jewelry to survive the embarrassment. Serafina left in an Uber Black with 6 garment bags and no audience. I stayed behind. After everyone left, the estate was quiet. Too quiet. I stood at the front door and looked down the driveway toward the gates. That was where I had walked away with Ronan in the rain. That was where I had stopped being Sterling's wife in my heart. My phone vibrated. "Sterling." I answered it because Rosalind was standing nearby, and the call was recording through the app. His voice was hoarse. I will never sign the divorce papers. I looked at the empty portico. Yes, you will. No, I won't. I'll drag this out for years. No, Sterling, I said. You'll run out of money first. His breathing hitched. Is that a threat? No. It's accounting. Mediation happened in a conference room with frosted glass walls and a table long enough to keep people from lunging at each other's throats. Sterling sat across from me, Alistair Graves beside him. Vivienne was not allowed in the building. Serafina was not invited. My father waited outside, by my choice. Not because Sterling deserved the comfort of his absence, but because I didn't need anyone confusing my backbone for borrowed steel. Rosalind placed 3 binders in front of her. Custody. Finances. Fraud. Sterling stared at the 3rd binder. That's excessive, Alistair said quickly. Rosalind smiled. Then this will be easy to resolve. The mediator, a retired judge named Sylvia Rutledge, looked at both sides over her reading glasses. We are here to reach a global settlement. I expect candor. Sterling leaned back in his chair. I want my family restored. I almost felt sorry for the mediator. She probably heard that line from a lot of men who actually meant they wanted their control, their comfort, and their reputation restored. I spoke up. I want a divorce, a permanent custody schedule, restitution of traced funds, and a permanent injunction, preventing Serafina Thorne from contacting Ronan. Sterling's face hardened. You don't get to dictate my personal life. No, I get to protect my child. Act accordingly. Alistair touched Sterling's sleeve. The mediator started with custody. Sterling wanted unsupervised overnights within 30 days. Rosalind countered. No. We propose a step-up plan of supervised visits, mandatory parenting classes, proof of infant care proficiency, and a review in 90 days. Sterling laughed bitterly. Parenting classes. I'm his father. Rosalind opened the first binder. Can you name Ronan's pediatrician? Sterling's face went blank for a half second. I looked down, not because I was embarrassed for him, but because I refused to help. He recovered. Dr. Miriam Hayes. First and last name of his night nurse? Silence. Brand of formula kept as backup in case Miss Vance cannot pump? Sterling's jaw clenched. That's a trick question. Judge Rutledge made a note. We moved on. Finances were worse. Sterling denied misappropriating funds. Rosalind produced the spreadsheets. Deposits into the family trust from me. Outbound wires to Thorne Design Studio. The apartment lease. The travel. The jewelry. The spa. The East Wing furniture. Alistair's face grew tighter with every page. Some of those were business development expenses, Sterling said. I looked at him. Was the Cartier bracelet business development? He said nothing. What about the cashmere baby blanket? His eyes darted up. There it was. The tiny transaction, but it was the one that caught him. Who was that for? I asked. Alistair intervened. My client will not answer speculative questions. Rosalind made a checkmark on the page. We'll save it for deposition. The mediator already looked exhausted. Then came the power of attorney. Rosalind placed the original, limited proxy I had found in my old emails next to the 4-page document Sterling had produced. My client signed this single-page document, she said. Mr. Harrington's archives produced this 4-page document, which purports to grant vastly expanded powers. We retained a forensic document examiner. Preliminary analysis indicates the signature page was transposed or digitally lifted. Alistair closed his eyes briefly. Sterling's face flooded with dark red color. This is insane, he said. Alara signed what I gave her. I signed 1 page while on bed rest, I said. You told me it was to pay the contractors and the staff. It was your responsibility to read it. And it was your responsibility not to swap the pages. Dead silence fell over the room. Judge Rutledge took off her glasses. Mr. Graves, she said. I strongly suggest you speak to your client in private. Alistair called for a break. Sterling stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. As he walked past me, he whispered, You're destroying everything. I looked straight ahead. No, I said. I'm just labeling what you built. During the break, I went to the restroom and stood at the sink, my hands gripping the marble. For the first time all day, my body reacted. My knees felt weak. My chest was tight. I looked in the mirror and saw the woman at the gates. Wet hair, rain on her skin, baby clutched to her chest. Then I saw the woman in front of me. Eyes dry. Prepared. Refusing to bend. Keep going, I whispered. When we returned, Sterling was different. Not softer cornered. Alistair did the talking. My client is willing to entertain financial restitution without an admission of fault. Rosalind didn't blink. Amount. Alistair named a number so insulting that even the mediator looked annoyed. I leaned forward. Sterling. He looked at me. Do you remember our first apartment? Confusion flickered across his face. What does Astoria have to do with this? The dishwasher was always broken. You always said we were happiest there because everything was ours. His expression shifted despite his efforts. I remember I paid the security deposit. I paid the rent when your parents' accounts were frozen. I bought the bed. I bought the dishes. I paid your bar association dues the year you said Vivienne was illiquid. I didn't keep score because I thought we were building a life. His lips pressed together. Then I delivered our son. And while I was bleeding and learning how to keep a newborn alive, you used the life I funded to move another woman into my house. He looked away. No, I said, look at me. Slowly, he raised his eyes. I am not asking for generosity. I am asking for the paperwork to stop lying. The mediator let the silence hang. Then Rosalind slid our settlement demands across the table. Restitution of traced personal funds used for Serafina. Division of marital assets. Permanent custody plan. A no-contact order between Serafina and Ronan. Non-disparagement clause. Cooperation with the real estate transfer. Retraction of the false claims about my mental health. Sterling read it. You want me to admit I lied. I want you to stop profiting from the lie. His phone vibrated on the table. He ignored it. It vibrated again. Alistair looked down. Sterling, he said quietly. You need to look at that. Sterling looked. His face changed. What is it? The mediator asked. Alistair took the phone, read it, and went pale. Rosalind's phone buzzed, too. She opened the email, then looked at me. We were just contacted by Serafina Thorne's attorney. I frowned. Her attorney? Rosalind's eyes turned razor sharp. She's offering cooperation. She claims Sterling instructed her to provoke you at the gates because he needed evidence that you were unstable. For a second, all the sound left the room. Then I looked at Sterling. He didn't deny it. Serafina hadn't flipped because she developed a conscience. She flipped because Sterling ran out of money faster than he ran out of lies. The next morning, Serafina's attorney sent the files. Screenshots, voicemails, emails, a photograph of a handwritten note Sterling had left in the East Wing. The messages were ugly in their simplicity. Sterling, she's emotional after the baby. If she shows up, let her lose her temper. Sterling, don't worry about the stroller. She'll look unstable if she reacts. Sterling, my mother agrees Alara needs to be pushed to leave. Serafina replied with heart emojis. And then, after the gate incident, she texted, We recorded you. Sterling's reply, Delete everything you have. I'll handle the house staff. I sat in Rosalind's office and read the text twice. I thought I had reached the bottom of the betrayal. I was wrong. There is always another basement. Sterling hadn't just failed to stop Serafina. He had set the stage. He wanted me to snap in public. He wanted me to scream, to push Serafina, to threaten someone anything he could weaponize for custody. Instead, I took a picture. Rosalind watched me carefully. Do you need a minute? No. You're allowed to take a pause. I know I will need many pauses, but not until we're finished. She nodded. The cooperation agreement with Serafina was limited. She wanted immunity from civil suits in exchange for her testimony and records. Rosalind promised nothing except that truthful cooperation would be noted. That afternoon, Serafina came in to give a recorded deposition. She looked smaller without the mansion behind her. No emerald gown, no silk robe. Just a beige trench coat, tired makeup, and fear. When she walked into the conference room, I didn't stand up. Her eyes darted to mine, then away. Alara, she said. No, she swallowed. I want to say I'm sorry. I looked at Rosalind. Rosalind stayed silent. Serafina wrung her hands. Sterling told me your marriage was over. He said you refused to accept it. He said you were using Ronan to control him. I waited. She continued. He said if you acted unstable, he could get custody, and the divorce would be cleaner. My fingers went cold. Cleaner, I repeated. Serafina flinched. He told me not to hurt the baby. I leaned forward. You threw his stroller into a rainstorm. He wasn't in it. But he was right there. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't care. I was jealous, she whispered. Of the baby. Of the house. Of you. Of me? He kept saying you were nothing without your father, but he was obsessed with whether your father would step in. Every time your name came up on a bank transfer, he tensed. Every time you called, he left the room. I thought, if you were just gone, he would finally choose me. I looked at her for a long time, and he did choose. Her lips trembled. No, of course not. Men like Sterling don't choose women, they choose mirrors. Serafina reflected his ego until the glass cracked. Her testimony gave Rosalind enough leverage to collapse every pillar of Sterling's defense. Custody, defamation, financial fraud, the forgery investigation. Sterling's world shrank rapidly after that. The Harrington Foundation Board suspended him pending an audit. Donors redirected their pledges after my father publicly funded the hospital directly. Alistair Graves withdrew as counsel on the financial case, citing a conflict of interest. Vivienne stopped calling me and started calling her old friends, who suddenly traveled too often to host her. Sterling hired a louder attorney. Louder didn't mean better. At the next hearing, the judge reviewed Serafina's texts and extended the supervised visitation order. Sterling was ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation for coercive control and complete financial discovery. The court also gagged him from discussing the litigation publicly or through third parties. He looked at me across the courtroom with such naked hatred it felt almost honest. I didn't look away. Outside, reporters were waiting because the whispers from the gala had become Page 6 gossip. I had avoided commenting until now, but Sterling made the mistake of stopping. This is a private family matter, he told a microphone. My wife is under the influence of outside forces during a vulnerable time. The phrase vulnerable time barely left his mouth when Rosalind stepped forward. Miss Vance will not litigate the safety of her child in the press, she said. However, any implication that she is unstable, manipulated, or acting out of anything but documented concern is demonstrably false. The court has reviewed the evidence. The temporary orders are public record. Then she guided me past him. One reporter called out, Miss Vance, do you want a reconciliation? I stopped. Sterling turned around. For years, I had answered questions to protect him. Smiled through discomfort. Changed the subject. Smoothed the edges. Absorbed the blow. Not this time. I turned to the reporter. No, I said. I want a safe life for my son and the legal conclusion of my marriage. That clip played everywhere. Not because I cried. Not because I attacked him. But because I didn't. The final settlement was drafted 3 weeks later. Sterling signed it after the forensic expert confirmed the POA was likely forged, and after Serafina's records proved intent to provoke. The threat of criminal referral made him pragmatic. I received primary physical custody, with his visits remaining supervised pending further review. He agreed to the no-contact order between Ronan and Serafina. He repaid a significant portion of the traced funds by liquidating personal assets, his remaining shares in the family investment fund. He retracted all claims regarding my mental health. He signed a non-disparagement agreement with penalties, severe enough to silence even Vivienne. The divorce itself took longer to process, but the marriage was over in every way that mattered. The day Sterling signed the final settlement, he asked to speak to me alone. Rosalind said no. I said, 5 minutes. Glass room. Door open. He walked in looking older but not destroyed. Men like Sterling are rarely destroyed completely. They just become less insulated by their charm. Alara, he said. I didn't think it would go this far. I almost laughed. That's because you never thought I could go this far. He looked down. I was angry after Ronan was born. At the baby. At losing you. No, I said. You were angry that I wasn't arranging myself around you anymore. He flinched. Serafina was a mistake. Serafina was a choice you kept making. I know you don't believe me, but it doesn't matter anymore. His eyes went red. I miss him. That was the only sentence that reached me. Not enough to yield, but enough to hurt. Then become a father a court doesn't have to supervise. He nodded quickly. I will. I swear. And maybe, someday, you and I? No. He stopped. I kept my voice soft. Because cruelty is not freedom. There is no someday for us. Sterling, you plan to paint me as unstable to take my child. His face contorted. I panicked. No. I panicked at the gates. And I still protected Ronan. You planned. That is the boundary between us. He had nothing to say to that. When I walked out of the room, he didn't follow. The gates of the Greenwich estate looked smaller in the sunlight. For months, they had lived in my memory as iron and rain. A dark silhouette closing in front of me while my son's stroller lay in the mud. But the morning I returned with Ronan, spring had softened the driveway. The trees were green. The stone lions flanking the entrance looked less like guards and more like props from a play I no longer wanted a part in. Ronan sat in his new stroller, dry and warm, kicking one leg under his blanket. I had picked out this stroller myself. Not because Serafina had ruined the old one, though she had. Not because I needed a symbol, though maybe I did. I picked it because it was sturdy, it was safe, and I could fold it easily with one hand. That was what mattered now. Things that worked. Things that protected. Things that didn't require me to beg. My father stood beside me, his hands in his coat pockets. Are you sure? He asked. I looked through the open gates. The mansion had been cleaned out. The east wing vacated. The nursery packed and moved to my apartment. The keepsake box now sat on my nightstand, not in a room where men used bait for mistresses. I'm sure. Vance Capital could have sold the estate immediately. Several buyers had already inquired. Old houses attract old money, and scandal only lowers the price for people who believe they are above it. But I had asked for time. Not to move back in. Never that. I wanted the deed transferred to Ronan's trust, and the property leased as a pro bono legal clinic and crisis center for women, funded by the Vance Foundation and overseen by Rosalind. Transitional housing. Legal aid. Financial counseling. A quiet place for women who needed a locked door, and someone to say, keep all the receipts and records. The room where Serafina slept would be offices. The dining room where Vivienne demanded apologies would host custody workshops. The gates where I had stood in the rain would open for women walking away from nights worse than mine. My father approved the plan without altering a single word. You know, he said, it is not the most profitable use of real estate. I smiled. I learned from you that profit isn't always the point. He shot me a look. I am absolutely certain I never taught you that. Nah. Moan did. His face softened. We walked up the driveway together. Halfway to the house, a car pulled in behind us. I knew who it was before I turned around. Sterling got out alone. He looked thinner. His suit was less perfect. His eyes went immediately to Ronan. Did Rosalind know you were coming? I asked. No. Then you should leave. I just want to talk. We have a co-parenting app for that. This isn't for the app. Then it's inappropriate. His mouth tightened, then relaxed. He was trying. I saw the effort, the new language from his parenting classes, the court-ordered restraint, the realization that anger had become too expensive a luxury. I saw the filing, he said. About the legal aid program. I waited. You're really turning my family home into that. It's Ronan's trust property, I said. And yes. His eyes darted to the mansion. My grandmother planted those roses. I know, we're keeping the gardens. My father died in that upstairs room. I know. We're making that floor private counseling suites, not bedrooms. Then he looked at me. Do you hate me that much? The question was almost innocent in its narcissism. No, Sterling. He blinked. I don't hate you enough to build my life around you. That wounded him more than hatred ever could. He looked down at Ronan again. Can I see him? Your scheduled visit is tomorrow at the center. 5 minutes. No. Alara, please. I put one hand on the stroller handle. At the gates months ago, the word please didn't exist for me. Only orders. Apologize. Leave. Bring Ronan home. Don't involve your father. I looked at him. Now the word please arrives too late, dressed up as remorse. No. Boundaries do not become cruelty just because you dislike them. He swallowed. I'm trying. Good. Keep trying where the court told you to. He looked past me at my father, then back at me. I loved you. I believed that he believed it, and that was the saddest part. You loved the version of me that paid, forgave, explained, hosted, smoothed the edges, and stayed put. Tears stood in his eyes. I really did love you. I nodded. Then you should have protected me when it mattered. A breeze moved through the trees. Ronan made a happy sound and reached for a toy attached to his stroller. The sound was small, bright, and completely uninterested in adult regrets. Sterling wiped his face quickly, embarrassed by his own tears. What happens next? He asked. For you? I don't know. And for you? I looked at the open front doors of the mansion. Inside, contractors were walking through, carrying boxes of legal volumes instead of silk linens. A woman from the foundation stood in the foyer discussing security upgrades. Rosalind was already there, sleeves rolled up, arguing with a vendor about privacy locks. For me, I said, life. Sterling let out a broken laugh. That simple? No. That hard. He nodded slowly. For once, he didn't argue. He walked back to his car. Before he got in, he looked at the estate one more time, then at me. I didn't wave goodbye. After he drove away, my father exhaled. Are you all right? I stared down the empty driveway. Yes. And I meant it. Not healed, not untouched, not unchanged. But all right. I pushed Ronan's stroller forward. The wheels glided smoothly over the stone. At the threshold, I stopped. The last time I left this house, I carried my son through the rain, while the people who were supposed to protect us merely watched. I thought I was leaving home. Now I knew better. Home is not stone, or gates, or portraits, or last names. Home is where your child can sleep without becoming a tool for blackmail. Where your name isn't erased, where love doesn't require proof of submission, where a closing door means safety, not exile. I looked down at Ronan. We aren't staying here, I told him. We're just making sure the next woman has somewhere to go. He kicked his leg and smiled, as if that answer satisfied him. Inside, sunlight spilled across the foyer. No Serafina. No Vivienne. No Sterling telling me to apologize. Just space. Just air. Just the sound of the gate standing open behind me. Because this time, I wasn't let in as a favor. I walked in by choice.